several mentions of intensive poultry units, or IPUs, and so we're going to have a little closer look at those. I'm Alison Caffin. I work for the Food, Farming and Countryside Commission now, but the research I'm sort of presenting to you was done at Cardiff University, funded through a ESRC studentship, so hence the multiple logos. And the photos I'm showing in the presentation today, I've tried to source photos of intensive poultry units from within the Lug catchment. I think most of them are. Oh, okay. Cool. So I mean, I didn't expect to find myself spending about 5 years of my life researching chicken sheds. It came sort of as a bit of a surprise, but I was commissioned to write an expert witness report from a tourism perspective. I was a tourism consultant before. I've worked with Richard here, actually, over a number of projects. And they were saying, well, can you come and help us make these objections to this poultry unit application near Prestine? And so I did that, and I got really interested in the subject, and I was looking for all the research that I assumed was available about the impacts of poultry units, and I couldn't find anything, really. Very, very little, almost nothing from the UK. In a social science remit, so there's absolutely nothing. So one thing led to another, and I ended up doing a PhD at Cardiff about it all. My research question, I was doing, I'm a social scientist. I don't know much about pollution and the chemical side of it all, and I'm not an agronomist or anything like that. I came from a geography and planning side of things. That's my perspective, the social scientist. And my question really was, I just kept seeing all these articles in the local paper and letters in the Hereford Times objecting to another intensive poultry unit in one part of the county or another. I'm sure a lot of you have saw them over the years. And I was thinking, well, why is it such, is it so polarised? Why are the arguments so intense? And this was one of the early, very, very controversial ones near Kington that some of you will probably recognise. And I chose Herefordshire and Shropshire, partly because they were the number 1 and 2 counties across the UK for intensive broiler units. This is data that was published in The Guardian in 2017. And you probably can't see, but the bar chart, the bar on the far left is Herefordshire. The next one in, the next highest is Shropshire. Research methods I did, some of it was desk-based, looking. I spent a month, I think, looking at the Herefordshire Council planning portal, trying to find all the planning applications for poultry units. I looked at the Hereford Times back catalogue of articles. I did loads of interviews with lots of different people, and then I went out walking. Sometimes I was walking with people to sort of walk. You know, a lot of intensive poultry units, not a lot, but some are built on top of rights of way. I mean, the rights of way continue, but you end up walking in between 2 chicken sheds. And you can do that in several locations around here. And so we went walking and sort of had a look at how it feels to be out in the countryside walking and walk through an intensive poultry unit. And then I went to lots of meetings. I'm clocking up something like 15 Nutrient Management Board meetings, Alyssa. And I did do some tourism work, but I probably can't speak about that today. Won't be time. This is the sort of basic data on the planning applications. In Shropshire, the online records go back an extra 10 years, which is why I've got that going back further. And this is measured by number of sheds, if you like, the actual buildings rather than the farms as such. But you can see there's this gradual increase over time. And looking at Herefordshire year by year from 2001 for 20 years, you can see the blue are the sheds again. This is individual shed buildings rather than applications. The number of sheds approved each year. The orange are the ones that were rejected, and you can see that's fairly few.
I just wondered whether you've got the distinction between ones that were approved by the council, ones that were not approved and then got through on appeal.
I've got the details for all the individual cases. What you do sometimes see here, that some of those early red ones were later approved. I would make that point. You don't see it in this chart, but that was certainly the case. And I should say I haven't actually updated 2021, and there are more orange red bits over on the right-hand side. There was another big one that was rejected a little while ago. So you can see, but the big 2014, just note 2014 now, and remember that year. I'm not an expert at GIS, but I did try and do a little bit of mapping for the picture between 2000 and 2017, and you can see, this is just a visual representation. You can see the lug catchment up there in the northwest of the county and the sort of intensification and the pink is the broiler units. The other colours are sort of turkeys or egg units and so on. The big difference with Powys, there's a lot more egg units in Powys, which are generally smaller. We have a lot more broilers, but there is a mixture. We do have some of all of them. Much better mapping was done by CPRW a few years ago. And here you see, I think a lot of you will be familiar with this map. It's online on the CPRW Brecon and Radnorshire website. And it covers the 3 counties. And again, you can pick up that the smaller dots in Powys are because they're egg units and there's fewer chickens, if you see what I mean. And the larger dots and the much bigger units in Herefordshire and Shropshire, all over the county. And then on the right-hand side, again, I didn't think I'd be spending months of my life counting chickens, but I think overall it could be somewhere around the 40 million mark. This is best estimates. It's really difficult. Obviously, it changes, literally, you're never going to get a perfect figure. But the Y catchment we now think is 20 or 21 million, and nobody's actually counted properly in Monmouthshire and the Forest of Dean yet, so I expect that to go up a bit. And then the Herefordshire part of the Y catchment is about 17 million, and off the top of my head, like this for the lug, for tonight, I reckon about 10 million perhaps in the lug catchment, but that don't quote me, that's finger in the air. So I thought it'd be useful, I wasn't just looking at water quality issues, but I thought it'd be useful just to give you the overall arguments for and against the intensive poultry units when they came to planning. And these are all the sort of arguments made for, which I probably can't go through absolutely all of them, but a lot of it is about the economics, the generating employment and business benefits, jobs for people. Poultry farming is unsubsidised as such. They don't get big public subsidies for the poultry itself. Cargill, now Avara, of course, is the biggest employer in Herefordshire. It's a major factor. And then down the right-hand side, there's issues around, it's better to grow our own than import it. And the environmental permit will sort any problems. And the people objecting, they weren't born here, they don't know about farming, they've all moved here from big cities and so on. And tourists won't notice the smell, they'll carry on coming. So those were the arguments made for IPUs. And the point here I want to make with this slide is that this is the huge range of reasons why people were objecting to the IPUs when they put objections into the planning applications. And I just wanted to sort of point out that pollution of waters and streams was just one of those, although there are overlaps with biodiversity loss, the cumulative impacts of all of the units, and issues around waste and manure management. But there's others there. There's things like bird flu, which I know Helen's very concerned about. And the arguments made against them, poultry is the most profitable sector of UK farming, or it has been over the last 10 years or so. People are arguing that these are industrial units, not agricultural. There's no, when you build a wind farm or you put a solar farm on your land, usually there's a benefit to the local community through a community levy or a community scheme for grants or something. And there's never one of those with a chicken unit. And in fact, although they don't receive subsidies for the poultry, a lot of them have got huge subsidies through the renewable heat incentive scheme, because a lot of them have got solar panels or the anaerobic digesters, which I'll come on to. Well, there's a lot of arguments there. You can read them yourselves. There's criticisms of the planning process, that it was undemocratic. The processing companies are huge multinationals. I mean, Cargill, Avara is part of Cargill, and they're one of the biggest, I think they are the biggest private company in the world, based in America. And then there's animal welfare concerns, and actually the UK is pretty much self-sufficient in chicken already. Okay. So I wanted to spend just a moment or two on this picture. This is a photo I took in Shobden, and you can see all the poo in the foreground, but you see 5 sheds in the background with the grain silos. You see a huge big building, which I think is probably something to do with biomass burner, perhaps. You see the AD unit and a huge tank just on the right-hand side in the background, and a huge mountain of poultry manure with a digger there to move it. And I think the other really interesting thing about this photo is the crop. It's maize. And maize is also being grown to go into the AD units. The AD anaerobic digestion is one key factor in this whole industry. And actually, the other thing about this photo is, since I took it a few years ago when I was leaving the Shobden Food and Flying Festival, there's 2 more units have gone in there, on top of where that maize is. So, a couple of aerial shots. You see, that's the aerial shot where the little red ring is. That's the units with the photograph of. Shobden's where the poultry industry first started in the 1960s. We go back a long time in this area with the poultry industry. But if you look, these are more sheds. That's Shobden. You go a couple of miles to the west, and this is Lyonshaw, or Lyonshaw. Lyonshaw, I calculated 1.7 million chickens in the parish of Lyonshaw. It's about 2,200 per person, which is amazing. Right, I need to move on. So I did look at, well, how did they get given permission? Why were they given permission? And there really was no policy, because it's agriculture. There was nothing in the local plan. We've touched already on the weakness of the Environment Agency, Natural England and the local authorities. No assessment of cumulative impacts until recently. Local people knew a lot of the issues, but their evidence wasn't being taken. And that links to the citizen science point. There was a call for supplementary planning guidance and an early attempt to do that. Now, I think we've got a draft, literally, this month. There is a draft of that supplementary planning guidance, but I was doing all my research in 2018, and we could have done with it numbers of years earlier. This is the key period I just wanted to focus in on, and this is a new graph, which I'm sharing for the first time, because I went and actually had a look at the numbers of the actual birds rather than the sheds, and tried to sort of pick it apart a bit. And I just wanted to point out that the Cargill expansion at their factory in Hereford was at the very end of 2013, beginning of 2014. They needed 90 new chicken sheds at that point. And you can see they got them in the following few years. And there was this 25% increase in less than a decade. And I put that down to weak planning processes. I'll come on to the Nutrient Management Board briefly in a moment, and the sort of power relations amongst all the actors making the decisions. So just a couple of last slides. One on, I'll do this quickly because we maybe come back and talk about the Nutrient Management Board, and we've got Alyssa here. But it was set up in 2014 as part of the Herefordshire Local Plan in order to enable that to go ahead. They were simply just ignoring. I went to a number of meetings and said, but what about the chicken sheds? And I was met with people saying, well, it's completely irrelevant. There's absolutely no connection between the number of chicken sheds in the catchment and the nutrient pollution. And they spent about 5 years working up this dashboard, which was measuring the farm visits and the sewage treatment improvements, which are significant and important. But only gradually, around 2019, did we see a sort of acknowledgement, oh, actually, maybe this is relevant. and maybe we need to sort of sit up and take notice. And then finally, I just wanted to sort of think, well, where's this going? There are still some active planning applications in. This site here, up near the border with Wales, there was one new shed went in a few years ago. There's a live application for another shed to go in as well, the same size as that one there. There are some improvements to the planning policy going on. There is lots of citizen science, which is my link to the next speaker, and Andrew's going to tell us more about that. But I do think there's some big questions about, what should we be monitoring? Should we be looking at the health impacts? I know there's a report coming out in a couple of weeks' time, because the council has been looking at the health impacts. And what is going to happen with the poultry industry? Are people going to carry on eating the same amounts of chicken? And if they don't, we've got a lot of redundant chicken sheds. What do we do with them? There's so many questions, but maybe we'll come on to those later. But thank you so much. I thought I'd leave you with the final shot of a final IPU down at Moreton on Lug, which you'll drive past as you go down to Hereford. And there's more information online if anyone wants it. Thank you.